It seems that every other game I come across purports to be an RPG in a box. It got me thinking about what really makes an RPG in a box and what games do I have that really feel like RPGs in a box, even if the game isn't marketed that way and even if the choices are surprising. Two of them stand out for me, and that's what I'm talking about here. I have Herman Lutman to blame for this video because my playthrough of Donna the Zedd second edition, which has been recent and somewhat obsessive, really got me thinking about this video. That in combination with the fact that I've been doing a couple of other games on the channel of late that are meant to be RPGs in a box. To me, Dawn of the Zeds and the other game I'm going to discuss encompass what actually I mean when I want that experience of an RPG in a box. Maybe not what game designers mean, I don't know. But for me, to get an RPG in a box game, in a board game, two things have to happen. There has to be the interaction of characters with the environment in a certain way, such as the differentiation of the characters works with the environment and the environment works with the characters. It's those two things. It's the interplay among those things, not having variable stats, for example, that for me gives that experience. And first, talking about Dawn of the Zeds here. What happens here in this game with these 12 heroes, 4 of which you start with, the abilities that they have don't change from game to game. You're always given this Doxever card, and he can always receive 2 dice when he's doing a healing action in medical, and he always gets this first aid option. Ditto for Sheriff Hunt. He's always going to be a leader. It's not going to change. His values will always remain the same. There's only one of I think only one of these characters, Captain Piazza, here, whose values change. And nevertheless, so that part is static, but the way in which these characters impact the game when they come into play always changes, and really doesn't just change a little bit mechanically, but changes in terms of further actions that you have to do. So there are consequences that for future turns based on what character does what in your turn. And because you have the limited number of actions a turn, you could only have 2 actions a turn and not be able to use a character or have to choose between them. You see a cascading effect. The way the design works, there is a cascading effect on what some of the characters can do. So, for example, you may choose to be setting up Mr. Johnson one turn, knowing that later on, because he has this heavy weapons ability, he's going to at least attempt or hopefully be able to take out some Zeds with a benefit. Likewise, you could be trying to get Big Wheels Carter to the end of a track because you know you're going to be running out of ammo and supplies, and you want him to be able to use his ability to get you more, his ability as a cargo hauler. So the fact that their abilities are static doesn't mean that the impact is static. It does change with the game state, and likewise, of course, the characters that you have in play at any given time, you're not going to have all 12 of them at once, and you're not going to have all 12 of them in a game. You get limited choice at the beginning as to who you get, and then it's randomized, and then event cards will bring them in. The other reason that you know that they have this impact is that when the events happen and you have to make choices, for example, this is just a random event, nervous breakdown, at the beginning of the action phase, you need to select a hero to possibly get a hit or 2 hits. You know that this, at least I know that this feels like a role-playing game when I'm really concerned about which character I'm going to potentially apply this wound to and the impact that that may have down the road. So it's not just the characters, but the way the events tie into the character abilities and characteristics. The environment itself, and here is a look at the environment, even though everything is on a track going into town, and to some degree there's a similarity there, there is enough differentiation in the environment so that some of the character abilities play into where the characters are on the map to have their different abilities come into effect. So you're also making choices as to where they go. All of this serves to create, in this case of this game, a very cinematic feel and to create drama so that when you are turning over the next event card, you do have a sense of kind of holding your breath to see what's going to happen and to determine which of your characters are going to take the lead in staving off some of the events. So this, I think, is a great example of character interaction with an environment to change the game state, not only in the immediate turn, but moving forward. Again, it doesn't have to do with variable stats, and I think that when I look at the range of games of late that I have been playing that purport to be RPGs in a box, the focus is on having some type of dynamic aspect to the character attributes. You don't need that, in my opinion, to have a real feel of a story, of a changing game state from game to game, and of an almost godlike sense of presiding over something that is playing out and can change depending on the individual people involved. And Dawn of the Zeds, at least the second edition here, I will say right now that I have only played the second edition. I haven't played any other edition of the game, but Dawn of the Zed second edition absolutely does that. And for that reason, to me, this feels very much like a role-playing game in the sense that I get invested in the characters, and the characters have an impact in the environment and in the story moving forward. The other game that really does this for me is something that might be surprising because it is, in essence, a pre-programmed adventure game. It's a paragraph-driven game, Voyager of the b.s.m. Pandora. I've done two videos on it, one very short and one longer video on it, so I'm not going to go over all of the mechanics of the game here, except to talk about it in the context of why does it feel like a role-playing game to me? Why does it feel like a evolving story that changes with each gameplay when indeed, for example, if you go to paragraph 84, it's always going to say the creature wanders out of its restraint pod looking for human flesh, roll 2 dice and blah, blah, blah. That couldn't be more static, could it? It's always going to be the same thing. Yet, what happens in this game, for me, is that when you begin the game each time, you have enough variables that change the state of the planets that you go to, the environment that you're encountering, and likewise the effects that this environment has on you as an adventurer, as an explorer, and your crew. And because of this, you do spend an aspect of the game determining who is going to be coming down from the Pandora to the shuttle, who's going to be landing on rover and on foot, and how those people, how the mechanic and the pilot and the medic, how they deal with the environment, and what type of adventuring are they going to do? Are they going to be primarily exploring? Are they going to be trying to capture creatures and bring them back? There is very limited but very effective use of a variable stat on some of the creatures, or really all of the creatures that you encounter, where you are not given their actual stats, but you're given modifiers to them. So you're rolling on the stats each time to determine how friendly they are, how aggressive they are, what the possibility might be for interacting with them in an intelligent manner and gaining some insight into the environment rather than just trying to capture them or to kill them. So all of that, while it is very simply done, for me creates a feeling of, again, a role-playing experience of my characters interacting with an environment, of a changing environment, and of, because of the changing environment, changing the effectiveness of my characters, even though the characters themselves don't change, and even though the character stats themselves are relatively limited. So every time, for example, I bring my medic out, these are going to be his stats, and it doesn't really matter what they are, but you can see they're not that many of them. But depending on the environment, depending on where we are and what it means in terms of atmosphere and size and a whole bunch of other things, It will depend on how he interacts, how he can work, his effectiveness, even to the extent of whether he's meant to go down into the environment or not, or stay on the shuttle, or go on a rover, or go on foot. And it is all achieved in a way with very few moving parts, but enough to make the experience different each time, and moreover, to make it feel, give the illusion at least, the feeling at least, of things changing, of the game state changing significantly from play to play. That to me is what you're looking for when you say it's a role-playing game in a box, that it is not just a board game in a box that has certain structural elements that feel the same from game to game. So even though in this particular case it is perhaps the most static type of game mechanic there can be, and the one that people say really limits replayability, which is to say a paragraph driven system of a narrative, for me, the mechanics of movement in the game create a situation where you feel as if the characters that you're choosing to play with have an impact on the game from game to game, and the game state itself changes from game to game. And that, for me, also is at the heart of what I'm looking for when I seek an RPG experience in a game box.